Public International Law, Unit 3. So these are the important questions in the third unit of PIL. We will see one by one. First concept is state succession. So what is the meaning of state succession? State succession occurs when new state is formed within the territory of existing state, or the state is transferred to a different state. Then it is called state succession. When within the territory a new state is formed, or a part of the territory of the state gets transferred to a different state, then it is called as state succession. Oppenheim. So according to Oppenheim, he gave definition of individual succession. So individual succession happens when one or more international persons takes place of another international persons as a consequence of certain changes in the condition of that international person. If an international person gets certain changes in his condition, then the other international person will take over his place. This is called individual succession. Kinds of state succession. So we have two kinds of state succession. The first is universal succession. In universal succession, a state is completely absorbed through subjugation or a voluntary merger. So the state gets completely absorbed via conquering. If a state attacks it and conquers it totally, it is called subjugation. It is called losing the territory by subjugation, and the succession is called universal succession. And if a state breaks into parts and becomes international persons or annexed by surroundings, so if a state breaks into different small parts and each part is claimed as an international person, then it is called as a universal succession. The next is partial succession. In partial succession, a state breaks away from a territory breaks away from a state, takes freedom from the state, and becomes an independent international person. So it is called partial succession. The example is Bangladesh. It got separated and claimed and became an international person. If a part of state ceded to another state, and if several states join a federal state, then it is called partial succession. When two or more states join together, it becomes a federal state. So if two or more joins together, then it is called partial succession. And if a state accepts suzerainty of a different state, or it becomes a protectorate state, then it is called partial succession. I have defined this federal, suzerainty and protectorate state in my second unit video. Theories of state succession. So what are the theories of a state succession? We have theories of continuity, negative theories, theories importing international law, communist theory of state succession. The first is theory of continuity. In theory of continuity, we have four theories. The first is theory of universal succession. So what this theory says is that only when a state succeeds, only rights and duties remain intact, and only subject changes. So what this theory of universal succession says is that when a state is succeeded, only the rights and duties remain intact, but only the subject changes. The next is theory of popular continuity. What this theory says is that only political element changes, only politician changes, but the real element of the state stays intact. The next is a theory of organic substitution. What they say is that the political element remains intact, but the organizational structure of the state changes. The next is a theory of self-abnegation. In this theory of succession, a state takes liberty and accepts or rejects a previous legal order. So any previous legal order they will accept or reject. It is at liberty. The next theory is negative theories. In this theory of succession, the sovereignty of predecessor state over absorbed state is abandoned. So the state who is conquering or taking the territory is called successor state. The state which is losing the territory is called predecessor state. So sovereignty of a predecessor state is totally abandoned by the successor state in negative theories. the successor state will not consider anything from predecessor state. The next is theories of importing international law. So in this state, the successor state discharges certain obligation of predecessor state and wastes certain right. So if a predecessor state had a certain obligation, the successor state will fulfill it, and they will also use certain rights to predecessor state in this theory. The next is the communist theory of state succession. In this theory, the successor state is not encumbered by the political commitments of predecessor. So in this type of succession, the successor state will not consider anything of predecessor state, any political commitments of predecessor state. Consequences or rights and duties arising out of state succession. So what are the consequences of a state succession or the rights and duties arising out of a state succession? Political rights and duties. The successor state is not bound by political treaties of former state. So the predecessor state, if it had made any treaties or political treaties, the successor state is not bound by it. It is free from it. Then local rights and duties. The successor state succeeds on rights and duties of former states. So if all the rights and duties of a predecessor state, the successor state takes it. The case is German settlers in Poland. So in this case, it was held that private rights and duties are not changed even after succession. The next is fiscal property debts. So private persons can't claim debt from succeeding states. So if a private person had a debt from a preceding state, after succession, this private person cannot claim his debt from the succeeding state. But what about public debts? This is an important concept. It has been asked as a short note also, public debt separately. Article 36, Part 4 of the Vienna Convention on State Property, Archive and Debts 1983, it was decided that the state debts do not pass to new state. The public debts do not pass to new state unless there is an agreement between the predecessor state and the succeeding state. So unless and until the predecessor state and the succeeding states make agreement to fulfill the public debts are not passed to the new state. Then Article 38 says that this agreement that the predecessor and the succeeding state make should not affect fundamental economical equilibrium of the new state, and the sovereignty of people over their wealth should not be affected. Then Article 40, this says that in separation of part of territory, debt passes in equitable proportion. If the succession takes place by separation of territory, then the public debts are equally divided between them. Then what about contracts? In West and Central Gold Mining Co. vs. R, it was decided that it is the state's discretion to fulfill contracts or leave it. So the succeeding state can decide whether to fulfill or not fulfill. It is up to them. Then laws. What about laws? Civil laws will continue until the succeeding state changes it. The next is nationality. So the nationality, the persons living in the preceding state loses their nationality and they will become new nationals of the new state, of the succeeding state. Succession of property in foreign states. So what if the predecessing state had a certain property in foreign state? So the new state, the succeeding state will take ownership of that property. The next is success to state archives. So the new state, the succeeding state, should preserve the preceding state's archives, any archives or documents. The next is treaties. The new state or the succeeding state is unencumbered, that is, it is not responsible for any treaties that the preceding state had made. The next concept is state jurisdiction or territorial jurisdiction. So what do you mean by territorial jurisdiction or state jurisdiction? Definition. It is the power of state under international law to govern persons and property by its municipal law. So territorial jurisdiction is nothing but the power of the state to govern the citizens and the property residing in its territory by its own municipal law or state law. When state can exercise jurisdiction over both states, other states. So when a state can exercise jurisdiction over other territories, other states. So we have two principles, subjective territorial principle and objective territorial principle. In subjective territorial principle, if a crime is commenced in one state, but the crime is completed in a different state, then the state where the crime was commenced, it can take jurisdiction of that crime. So this is subjective territorial principle. The next is the objective territorial principle. In this, if some constituent of crime consummated in a territory, then the jurisdiction over crime can be taken. If the crime only some constituent of that crime is committed in the territory of a state, then that state can take its jurisdiction. The case is the SS Lotus case. In SS Lotus case, what happened was a French ship called SS Lotus rammed with a Turkish ship and killed 8 crew members of that ship. So Turkey took that ship in their custody and started prosecuting it. So France objected over it. They said that it does not fall in their jurisdiction. They have to return the ship and France will run its prosecution. But the International Court of Justice held in favor of Turkey, said that Turkey can run proceedings over that crime. It will fall under Turkish jurisdiction. Next are exceptions to state jurisdiction. Who are immune to state jurisdiction from state jurisdiction? Diplomatic agents. Diplomatic agents are the persons residing in different state territory, but they are loyal to their own state. They are performing certain functions of their own state. Since they perform special functions, they have certain immunities from state jurisdiction. The next are foreign embassies. So foreign embassies are considered as part of a home state and they also enjoy immunities. The next is foreign sovereigns. So one sovereign state cannot exercise jurisdiction over another sovereign. But we have seen exceptions, the objective and subjective principles in the cases of crimes. The next is immunity in respect of public property of a foreign sovereign state. So international in respect of public property of foreign sovereign state, they have immunity to jurisdiction. The next are international organizations like UN, International Labour Organization, they are also immune. The next are extradition treaties. So the states go into extradition treaties. For example, if the person of a state commits crime and runs to a different state, then the other state should return them back. They should not prosecute them. The next is foreign troops. So foreign troops have immunity, but if foreign troops are passing through another state's land, then that state can employ its troops to maintain discipline over those troops. The next is immunity of warship and their crew. So warships and the crew are have lots of immunities from state jurisdiction, but the warship doesn't get any immunity if it enters as disguised in foreign state. The next is state responsibility. The next major concept is state responsibility in this unit. So what is the meaning of state responsibility? It is the legal responsibility of a state by which it cannot create or abolish international law as it creates and abolishes municipal law. So a state has a total control over municipal law in its state law, but the way it creates and abolishes municipal law, it has a legal responsibility to not create and abolish international law. This is state responsibility. State responsibilities in different fields. The first is international delinquency. So what do you mean by international delinquency? Definition. It is the injury to the state by a head or government of state in international duties. So if the state fails to do its international duties and as a result of which another state gets injured, then it is international delinquency. Stark definition. So J.G. Stark has given definition for it. He says that it is a breach of duty by a state which is not a breach of contract. So it is not a breach of contract, it is a breach of duty of state over another state in its international duties. A state may be injured as how a state gets injured by unjustified intervention of one state over another state, by a treaty violation. If two states have went into treaty and one state violates it, then the other state gets injured. The rights or property of its citizens abroad is violated So if one state citizen is living abroad and his rights or property gets violated, then the other state gets injured. International delinquency is a wrongful act. So international delinquency is a wrongful act in international law. What is the remedy if a state commits international delinquency? The remedy is compensation. Imputability. Imputability means taking responsibility. When will the state held responsible for a delinquency? If the conduct of the state is a breach of international duties. If the state commits international breach of duty, and according to international law, breach is attributed to state, that breach should be attributed to state, then the state will be imputable or should have to take responsibility of the delinquency. There is a case, Yeoman's case. In this case, what happened was the Mexican mayor asked its troops to fire on rioters, but instead, in firing on rioters, they started firing on American houses in that locality, and some Americans were injured and some were killed. The Mexican government was held responsible for its troops' act because they did not show as an international delinquency. The next persons are aliens. So, how aliens are responsible? They provide some rights as citizens. So, a state should provide certain rights to citizens. If an alien is residing in the state, then the state, alien is foreigners, then the state should give same rights to that alien as it is given to its citizens. In aliens, we have two types. One is private individual, the other is mob violence. So, act of private individuals. State is not liable for the acts of any private individuals. Any international delinquency caused by a private individual of a state, then state is not responsible unless it has taken due diligence, due care to prevent it. The next is mob violence, an act of mob violence. An act of mob violence which hurts the international delinquency. So it is the same as private individual. The state is responsible if not taken due diligence. So state is only responsible if it did not took due care or due diligence to protect the mob violence. There is a case, United States diplomatic and consular staff in Tehran. In this case, the militants in Iran occupied US diplomatic and consulars. Iran was not held responsible because they were militants and they were not a part of Iran. But later on, these militants joined the military of Iran. So when they joined the military of Iran, Iran was held responsible for their acts. Thanks for watching.